They found the crumpled photograph in Steve McQueen's pocket the day he became a legend. September 30th, 1955. A mangled Porsche 550 Spyder, twisted metal, shattered glass. James Dean was dead, and Hollywood was about to create a monster they never intended. Steve McQueen wasn't supposed to be anybody. He was a mechanic from Indianapolis, grease under his fingernails, rage in his chest, sleeping in his car outside casting offices in Los Angeles. But when Dean's silver Porsche slammed into that Ford Tudor at 85 miles per hour, something shifted in the universe. Hollywood needed a replacement. They just didn't know they were about to get their exact opposite. The phone calls started immediately. Panicked studio executives, agents, casting directors. Find someone who looks like him, sounds like him, can cry like him. The vulnerability, the tortured soul, the broken boy who made teenage girls weep in movie theaters across America. That was the formula. That was what sold tickets. Steve McQueen walked into his first audition 3 weeks after the crash. The casting director looked up from his notes, and his face went pale. Jesus Christ, you could be his twin brother. McQueen's jaw tightened. He'd heard that comparison 17 times in the past month. On the street, in diners, at gas stations. Hey, aren't you that actor who died? The anger was building like steam in a radiator. I'm not James Dean, McQueen said, his voice flat and cold. I'm not trying to be James Dean. I'm trying to be me. The casting director smiled that Hollywood smile. Kid, right now, being James Dean is worth about $10 million. You should be grateful for the comparison. McQueen stared at him. I don't want to be a replacement. I want to be the original. The audition didn't go well. They wanted tears. They wanted vulnerability. They wanted him to break down emotionally, to show the raw, wounded sensitivity that had made Dean a star. McQueen gave them stone. He gave them ice. He gave them nothing. You look like him, the casting director said, shaking his head. But you don't have his soul. You don't have that beautiful brokenness. McQueen walked out, but he didn't give up. He had a plan. If Hollywood wanted to compare him to James Dean, he was going to make sure the comparison worked in his favor, but he wasn't going to copy Dean. He was going to beat him. And to do that, he needed to understand exactly how Dean had died. The garage was in Burbank, dark and grimy, smelling of motor oil and failure. Rolf Wutherich worked alone now, his hands still steady despite everything they'd seen. The German mechanic had been James Dean's passenger that September afternoon. He'd survived the crash that killed America's rebellious sweetheart, and he'd never talked about it. Not to the press, not to the police, not to anyone, until Steve McQueen showed up. You're Wutherich, McQueen said. It wasn't a question. He stood in the doorway, racing gloves folded in his hands, studying the man who'd lived through Hollywood's most famous death. Wutherich looked up from the engine he was rebuilding. I don't talk to reporters. I'm not a reporter. McQueen stepped into the garage, closing the door behind him. I'm an actor, and I need to know about the car. Which car? The Spyder, the one that killed him. Wutherich's hand stopped moving. He set down his wrench and wiped his palms on a dirty rag. Why do you want to know about that? McQueen pulled out the crumpled photograph, the twisted metal, the shattered dreams. Because everyone says I look like him. Everyone wants me to be him. But I'm not going to die like him. Wutherich stared at the photograph for a long moment. You want to know the truth? Jimmy was scared of the car, terrified of it. He bought it because it was fast, because it was dangerous, because it made him feel alive. But he never mastered it. He drove fast because he was running from his fear, not because he had conquered it. McQueen felt something shift inside his chest. He was afraid. Every time he got behind the wheel, his hands would shake. He'd smoke 3 cigarettes before starting the engine. The speed wasn't courage, it was panic. Wutherick picked up a connecting rod, examining it in the dim light. That's why he died. Fear makes you careless. Fear makes you crash. McQueen stood there absorbing this revelation. The great James Dean, the icon of fearless rebellion, had been terrified of the very thing that killed him. What about you? Were you afraid? I was the passenger. Wutherick said quietly. I had no control. Fear was pointless. That night, McQueen sat in his rented room, staring at the crumpled photograph. Control. That was the difference. Dean had been controlled by his fear, driven by it, ultimately destroyed by it. McQueen was going to be different. He was going to master the machine that had killed his rival, not just drive it, but dominate it completely. The rejection came in 1958, on the set of a Western where McQueen had landed a small role. The director, a nervous man with thick glasses and sweaty palms, had seen Dean's movies 17 times. He knew exactly what he wanted from his actors. The scene calls for tears, the director explained, adjusting his viewfinder. Your character just lost his brother. I need you to access that pain. Dig deep. Show me that beautiful vulnerability. That's what Jimmy would do. That raw, honest emotion. McQueen looked at the script, then at the director, then at the crew of 30 people waiting for him to perform grief on command. No. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not going to cry for your camera. The director's face flushed. This is how acting works, son. You tap into your emotions. You give the audience something real to connect with. That's what made James Dean a star. That willingness to be vulnerable, to be broken. McQueen stood up, brushing dust off his costume. James Dean is dead. I'm not. And I'm not going to fake tears to make middle-aged women feel better about their lives. Then how exactly do you plan to convey emotion? McQueen stared directly into the camera. His eyes were cold, calculating, dangerous. No tears, no trembling lip, no manufactured vulnerability. Just pure, controlled intensity. With this, if you need me to cry to tell your story, you're not a very good director. The set went silent. Nobody talked to directors like that in 1958, especially not unknown actors with 3 lines in a B-Western, but something in McQueen's eyes, something in his absolute stillness, made everyone understand that he wasn't bluffing. He would walk away rather than compromise. The director blinked first. Fine, we'll try it your way. The scene worked, not because McQueen showed pain, but because he showed strength. He created a new archetype that afternoon, the stoic hero, the man who feels everything but shows nothing, the opposite of James Dean's tortured vulnerability. And Hollywood noticed, but McQueen wasn't satisfied with acting differently. He needed to live differently. In 1959, he walked into a Porsche dealership in Beverly Hills and bought a 356 Speedster, not because he wanted to copy Dean's car, but because he wanted to prove he could master what Dean couldn't. The salesman, recognizing him from recent movie appearances, made the inevitable comparison. Just like James Dean, huh? You actors and your fast cars. McQueen signed the papers with steady hands. James Dean crashed. I won't. Riverside Raceway became his church. Every weekend, McQueen would drive the 90 miles east of Los Angeles to the desert track, pulling on his racing gloves, feeling the leather conform to his fingers. This wasn't acting. This wasn't pretending. This was physics, mathematics, the science of speed and control. The other drivers knew who he was. But on the track, celebrity meant nothing. You either had skill or you crashed. McQueen had skill. More than skill. He had an understanding of the machine that bordered on supernatural. Every gear change, every brake point, Every apex was calculated and executed with surgical precision, but he wasn't racing against the other drivers. In his mind, every lap was a pursuit. He was chasing James Dean's ghost around every turn, proving that he could do what Dean never could: control the speed instead of being controlled by it, master the fear instead of running from it. The smell of burning rubber, the G-forces pressing him into his seat, the engine note climbing through the RPM range. This was where McQueen found his identity. Not in Hollywood, not in the comparison to a dead actor, but here, where survival depended entirely on skill and courage. By 1963, he'd graduated to bigger, faster cars, a Jaguar XKSS, one of only 16 ever made, the same model that had burned in a factory fire, making each survivor worth a fortune. McQueen didn't buy it for the rarity or the status. He bought it because it was dangerous, and he wanted to prove he could tame danger itself. Laguna Seca, Willow Springs, Riverside, track after track, race after race. McQueen built a reputation not as an actor who raced, but as a racer who acted. The distinction mattered. Dean had been killed by a machine he couldn't control. McQueen controlled every machine he touched. The call came in early 1968. Bullitt, a police procedural set in San Francisco. The script called for car chases, but the studio wanted to use rear projection, filming the actors in a stationary car against a moving background. Safer, cheaper, more controllable. McQueen read the script in his trailer, the crumpled photograph of Dean's Porsche still tucked in his wallet. After all these years, this was it. This was his moment to finally prove that he had not just survived James Dean's shadow, but had grown beyond it entirely. "I want to do the driving myself," he told the director. "Steve, it's too dangerous. Insurance won't cover it. The studio won't allow it." McQueen pulled out the photograph, smoothing it against his knee. Dean died because he wasn't in control. The car controlled him. I control the car. The argument went on for weeks. Studio executives, insurance companies, lawyers, all trying to convince McQueen to use a stunt double. He refused every compromise. If they wanted Steve McQueen in this movie, they got all of Steve McQueen, including behind the wheel. The Highland Green Mustang 390 Fastback growled to life in the streets of San Francisco. McQueen pulled on his racing gloves, feeling the familiar leather against his palms. This wasn't Riverside or Laguna Seca. These were city streets, with innocent bystanders, traffic lights, and zero margin for error. The chase sequence through Russian Hill, over Taylor Street, down Fillmore. McQueen drove every foot of it himself, the Mustang's engine screaming as it launched over the crest of hills that dropped away like ski jumps. The famous reverse burnout, tires smoking as the car spun in a tight circle. Every stunt, every dangerous maneuver, executed with the precision he'd developed over a decade of racing. When the cameras stopped rolling, McQueen sat in the Mustang for a long moment, engine ticking as it cooled. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the crumpled photograph of James Dean's destroyed Porsche. He'd carried it for 13 years, a reminder of what he was determined not to become. He stepped out of the Mustang and walked to a trash can on the corner of Taylor and Fillmore. The photograph fluttered down among the cigarette butts and candy wrappers. He didn't need it anymore. The movie became a phenomenon. The car chase redefined action cinema. And Steve McQueen officially inherited the title that had been waiting for him since 1955, the King of Cool. But it wasn't Dean's version of cool. It wasn't tortured vulnerability or beautiful brokenness. It was controlled power, mastered fear, and the absolute confidence that comes from surviving what killed your predecessor. McQueen never spoke publicly about James Dean after Bullitt. He didn't need to. He had finally answered the question that had haunted him for over a decade. He hadn't become the new James Dean. He had become the first Steve McQueen, and unlike Dean, he had lived to enjoy it. The racing gloves went into a drawer in his Malibu home, next to his trophies from Sebring and Le Mans. The Mustang went to a collector, but the lesson remained. Sometimes the only way to escape a ghost is to master the thing that created it. James Dean died afraid of speed. Steve McQueen lived by conquering it. Do you think Steve McQueen truly escaped James Dean's shadow? Or was he forever defined by trying to be different from him?